Okay, and we are now live for Adobe Community Philippines. Once more, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Digital Drawing for Beginners in Adobe Photoshop. Once more, Digital Drawing for Beginners in Adobe Photoshop. In a few minutes, about to begin. If you think this live stream is beneficial to someone you know, please invite them to join us, most especially to those who would like to learn to draw, learn how to draw using Adobe Photoshop. Okay, so if you're planning to teach an Adobe software, okay, inviting you to be an Adobe Creative Educator. So pasting down the link for you to take up Adobe Creative Educator. It has two levels, level 1 and level 2. So I'm showing you the ones for level 2. So after completing this course, you'll be also having a badge similar to the badge when you take up the challenge of Adobe certification exam. But of course, the difference with Adobe certification exam is, of course, it is a timed exam. So once more, encouraging everyone for you to qualify in our raffle draw of an Adobe exam voucher and LinkedIn subscription. Okay, once more, encouraging everyone to register now. So I'm pasting the link for you to register. Okay, so once more, and without further ado, let's now learn how to digitally draw. Okay, using Photoshop. Okay, so sharing to you our sharer this evening. Let's give a warm evening and welcome to Trisha May. Hi, Trish.
Hello, sir. Glad to be here.
Ayan. So, once more, thank you so much, Trish, for sharing your knowledge. Ayan, to most especially to our young ones and
It's
the
a
fellow
pleasure.
students. Inspiring them to digital creativity. Miss Trish, when did you
Yes,
learn how Photoshop? Why? Why
Photoshop.
did you? Who pushed you to learn Photoshop? What circumstances arose?
That's actually a nice question, Sir Mark. I actually learned Photoshop about 2 to 3 months ago, and I just got hooked into it, and now I can create some things that came from my imagination, like from my passion. So why I use Photoshop is because it's a great software if you ask me. Because I can just do everything I want. I can draw, I can make a logo, anything. I can even make our family picture with just different images. So I actually think it's a very fun and versatile software.
Some of our viewers are curious. What course are you currently taking or have you taken?
Right now, I am a first year student from a fine arts course, major in visual communication in the University of the Cordilleras in Baguio City.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I believe you're still studying online, right?
Yes, it's a very fun experience.
And curious to know what, aside from Photoshop, what other Adobe softwares do you know?
I know I can use Premiere Pro, Media Encoder. Adobe Illustrator, I'm kind of getting the hang of it. And right now for Adobe Animate, I just get the essentials for the animation part. But right now, I could confidently say I know Premiere Pro and Photoshop.
Okay, so we're excited for you to share your knowledge as well with regards to Premiere Pro and After Effects. So, good evening to Miss Leia, Raven. Good evening. I'm showing you a glimpse of the persons who are currently registered. So, once more, Registration is now open for you to qualify. We're raffling away an Adobe certification exam and subscription to go with it for you to pass the exam. So subscription to LinkedIn Learning. So yep, once more, encouraging everyone to register now and be an Adobe Creative Educator. So yep, without further ado, digital drawing for beginners in Adobe Photoshop. Take it away, Miss Trish.
Thank you, Sir Joe Mark. Okay, now you can see my screen. Let us start. Hello everyone, welcome to Digital Drawing for Beginners in Adobe Photoshop. In this lesson, you will learn the basic tools needed to start drawing digitally in Photoshop. Later on, we will apply those techniques by drawing your very own character. After that, we will expand even further and try to create your own isometric room. So, without further ado, let's start! So, before heading to Photoshop, there's one specific thing that we need to learn because for sure it will save us a lot of time and headaches in the near future. And that is having a drawing tablet. So, a drawing tablet is the main tool we're gonna use here when we are drawing with Photoshop. Of course, you can use a mouse for drawing, but it isn't really recommended because it might give you injuries if you're doing it for a long period of time. So, drawing tablets comes in two types. One is a graphic tablet and another is a display tablet. The main difference between these two is a graphic tablet doesn't have a screen, and often these are the cheaper ones to buy. So, in a graphic tablet, when you're drawing, your hand draws here, but your eyes would be looking directly at your computer monitor. While a display tablet, on the other hand, is like your computer monitor. But instead of just looking at it, you can actually draw on top of it. Of course, when you don't have any drawing tablet, it is highly recommended to buy what you can afford because drawing tablets are just nearly 1% of your whole drawing skill. So instead of investing your money in an expensive display tablet, just save that for now and just use a graphic tablet because there is indeed a learning curve, but with time and practice, you can actually get used to it until it is second nature to you. So just a note, choosing the expensive ones won't make you draw better. So if you're gonna plan on buying one, buy one you can afford, and hopefully you could start on beginning to develop your skills in drawing. One reason why we also need to use a drawing tablet is because of one specific feature which is called pressure sensitivity. So to understand this, I'm going to give an example. When we are drawing with a pencil, the harder we press, the darker and thicker our strokes are. But the lighter we press, our strokes would appear lighter and thinner. The same goes with our stylus. The only difference is we can do that digitally, something that a mouse cannot do. So, nowadays the standard pressure sensitivity is 8192 levels. We don't need to get into details about that, but later on I will explain what these levels mean. So after having a drawing tablet, we need to understand something first. So now that we know pressure sensitivity, there's also one thing our tablet needs so that we can fully use it and customize it. And that is called the drivers. So basically, a driver is a software that makes you use the full potential of your tablet because when you buy a new drawing tablet and you plug it into your computer, chances are it might not work exactly as you intended it to do. So what you're gonna do is you head on to Google. Here's Google. So what we're gonna do is we have to type the model name of our drawing tablet. So for mine, it's called Artist 15.6 Pro, and we just have to add our drivers at the end. So most likely they're gonna appear at the top results. So for mine, I'm gonna click this one. Take note that we might have different manufacturers, so the website might not be intended for you. So it's gonna appear like this, and all you have to do is find your drawing tablet. So for me, this is my drawing tablet, and you're gonna find a download button here. So if you're on Mac, you can download this drivers, or if you're on Windows, you can download here. But since I already downloaded this one, I don't really need to download it again. So to give you a brief guide, all you have to do is click the downloaded file and just install it. It might take a few minutes for it to be installed, so I'm gonna explain how the driver works. So right now, I'm gonna show you my drivers. Take note that we might have different interface when it comes to drivers, but their function is the same. So one thing we all have in common in our drivers is this pen pressure sensitivity graph, as you can see. By default, it is actually a straight diagonal line. But for my personal preferences, I'd rather put it this all the way top. So what does this mean exactly? So this pen pressure sensitivity controls how sensitive your tablet is to pressure. So for example, I have a very light hand. So when I'm drawing, sometimes Photoshop doesn't register my stroke because I put too little pressure. So by default, this is actually a straight line. I'm gonna click OK. So now I'm gonna create a new layer to test this out. So right now, I'm actually drawing, but Photoshop doesn't register my stroke. So if I'm going to my drivers and adjust that again all the way to the top, you're gonna see the difference. Right now you can see the brush strokes showing, which means Photoshop actually registered my stroke. So this happens when you have a very light hand, or if you have a heavy hand, you can adjust it so you can utilize the pressure when you're drawing. If you still don't know what this does, you can actually put it to default. There's nothing wrong about that. What you can do is put it to default, try to practice, trial and error, and eventually you're gonna find which pressure works for you. So if the default is fine, then it's okay. But if you have a light hand like me, you could adjust it up here. And if you have a very heavy hand, you could put it right there. Just a side note that if you have a very heavy hand, I suggest you try to loosen up, because over time your tablet is gonna thank you for that. So right now I'm gonna put it on the very top. So when your tablet has shortcut buttons, you can actually edit them in any way. So if you want to change it to a keyboard shortcut, right click, middle click, anything as long as your tablet shows it. So other than that, here is another thing that you should keep in mind. Windows Ink works well for me when it is checked or when it is turned on. My pen pressure for Photoshop works well when Windows Ink is turned on, while some others says that when it is turned off, it is actually better for them. So I think this is okay for you to guys experiment this if your pen pressure works well with or without Windows Ink on. And last but not the least, the most important thing I want to talk about is this current pen pressure here. So this bar will actually tell you if your pen pressure is working. So here I am pressing my stylus onto my tablet. As you can see, this is the levels of pressure that we often see on a brochure. So if this is working like intended, like if this is having a bar here, it means your pen pressure is working. But if you're pressing hard enough or soft enough and it still says 0, you need to fix something on your tablet. It may be a loose cable, a driver error, or you could just restart your computer to check if it solves the problem. So basically, that's the most important thing you need to find out right now. So after that, we could just click on OK and head on to Photoshop. So right
Uh,
now I am on
Krish,
Photoshop. Yes, sir.
Krish, we have a question. They're curious what tablet are you using? Are you using a display or what do you call
Uh,
it? Graphics tablet?
yes, sir. I am actually using a display tablet, which I can show here. It actually looks like this. I'm not sure if you can see it. But so
Yep, we're
this
seeing
is
it.
a display tablet. It's not a standalone system because you need to connect it to your computer. So this is what I use. But if you don't have this kind of tablet, you don't have to worry because tablets are just a tool for us for drawing. You can actually get by with just a graphic tablet because a lot of professionals still use that for drawing. So this is just a overview of what I use for my tablet. So I'm just gonna leave it
Yep.
here.
Okay. In addition, we have some parents here asking how much should be our budget for my child who wishes to draw digitally. Any recommendations under 5,000 pesos with regards to tablets?
Actually, sir, with just 5,000, you can actually have a decent tablet because, to be honest, my first tablet was worth 1,500 and it was actually a bit small, but it was usable. I've been using it for months because at the end of the day, it's never the price of the tablet. If you're gonna buy some stuff, just buy what you can afford. Don't really need to have this display tablet because it's not gonna improve your skills in any other way. So if you have 5,000, you can actually buy one for 3,000, and that's brand new. If it's secondhand, you can get it at a much lower price. So that's your my answer,
Okay,
sir.
awesome. Okay, going back to you.
Okay, so let's move on. So now that we have our drivers installed, let's try to create a new canvas. So when you open Photoshop, you're going to be greeted with this kind of interface. So this is actually the only thing we need to know, which is create new button. And here we have a new window and it's called new document. So in here, we have a lot of presets we can choose from if ever we are going to make something for a specific purposes. But since we are drawing, we are going to use art and illustration. So for now, let's use the blank document presets, which is 1000 pixel grid. Okay, now let's say you want to adjust this one. You want to customize it. You can actually do it right here. So for me, I'm going to change this by 1920 by 1080 pixels. So there you go. And here is the orientation if you want it to be landscape or portrait. So landscape or portrait, the values are just going to change. And here are some extra things if you want to use inches, centimeters. But now I'm going to stick with pixels. So here, this is an important part is the resolution. If you're making this artwork for just yourself or social media, 300 resolution is okay. But if you are going to print it, chances are you need to make sure this is 300. If you're going to print it on a paper, 300 is fine. But if you're going to print it on a bigger scale, let's say a billboard, you have to increase this resolution so that you won't lose the details of your drawings. So if you want to print this on a t-shirt or a mug, chances are you need to contact your printing services so that you know if you are drawing in the right resolution. Next is the color mode. We usually use RGB color because RGB provides a lot of colors that sometimes that it cannot be printed. And sometimes people use CMYK color. And CMYK is often the color we use for printing. So if you have noticed, your printer has CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and K for black. But for now, let us use RGB color. Here we have 8-bit, you don't really need to think about it that much. Background contents. Basically, this is the color of your background. Usually, people have it at white. You can actually change it if you want. if you want a blue, green, or anything. Right now, let's try to use white. And here are some other things that you really don't need to think about. So with that, I just click create, and I have a new canvas. So if you have created a new canvas, chances are this doesn't look like the same as yours, especially this panel. We can actually solve that. All we have to do is click these three lines here at the very end and say click close tab group. This would automatically delete all the tab group we have here. Even actually this one, this is a tab group. So just click exit. And let's say you move this one accidentally. You can actually just exit it. So if you have a canvas like this, don't worry, we can bring them back. We only need the essential. So what we're going to do here is go to window, and down here you could see tools, click tools, and this is actually the toolbar. So if you want it here, let's place it here. So you have a toolbar here. This is the most important thing we really need. Next is our panels. The most common panels we need are the color. So there's our color panel. The window, the next thing we need are layers, and then our brushes. It says brushes. So if you want to adjust it, you can adjust it right here. You could see that arrow there, so you could adjust what kind of or how big or how small your panels are. So don't worry about what this does. I'm gonna cover them in the next lesson. So right now, that is how you create a canvas. So I'm just gonna open my new lecture again. Open recent on my lecture. So there you go. Just gonna click save. Now we move on to navigating Photoshop. So navigating Photoshop is actually one of the most common thing we really need to learn. So before that, we actually just made a canvas. So that short video is just us making a canvas in Photoshop. And the thing that we need to remember is when we are using Photoshop, we need to actually know what we are going to make. So if we're just going to make a digital illustration, then you can use 300 resolution because resolution is important because somewhere down the road you're gonna encounter some problems with it if you haven't learned what a resolution does. So after that, we are going to learn how to navigate Photoshop. So let's go back here to Photoshop. So the next thing we need to discuss is something that should be second nature to us when we are using Photoshop because we are going to do this all the time. And that is navigating Photoshop. So before we delve onto this one, we need to go to preferences. So preferences is Control K in your keyboard shortcut. But if you forget it, all you have to do is just go onto the menu bar, click Edit, Preferences, and General. So once you have this window right here, all you have to do is go to Tools, and in Tools, you enable overscroll and disable flick panning because this will help you a lot. So what if I didn't do this? So I'm just gonna disable this and enable flick panning. So I'm gonna show you guys what happens. So just a disclaimer, swipe is moving your pen while touching the tablet. So if I use a brush tool, basically I'm doing like this. See, just swiping it. So to pan, all you have to do is hold space and you can see this hand icon and just swipe. For me, it's not doing anything. But if I zoomed in, that's gonna happen. But if I zoom out, it's not happening. Why? It's because of overscroll. So that was what I was talking about earlier. So if I enable overscroll, it's gonna let me pan even outside the canvas. This is very useful if your tablet has a very small active size. So this is gonna help you a lot. But as you can see, as I'm swiping, it kinda has this slippery paper feeling, as you can see when I am panning. And that is because of the flick panning. So if I disable the flick panning under tools, disable, okay, it's gonna give me this precise pan. So you don't have to get dizzy when you're panning. So to zoom in or out, all you have to do is hold space and control at the same time, as you can see, and it's gonna show this magnifying glass icon, and just swipe left and right. So swipe left to zoom out and swipe right to zoom in. This takes times to get used to, but just a little bit of practice and this will become second nature to you. So what if zoom in and out doesn't work if you click control or space? If it doesn't work, what you can do is press Z, or you could click this icon right here in the toolbar and just click to zoom in. So as you can see, it has a plus icon. So if I click, it's going to zoom in. To zoom out, I'm just gonna hold Alt and click. So if control and space is working for you, that is going to be a big advantage. Next, to rotate, we have to click or hold R. So if I click R, it's gonna show me this icon. You can actually click rotate here. And what you do is just swipe up and down, left and right until you get your desired rotation. So what if you put your rotation here and you want to go back? All you have to do is just press the escape key and you're good to go. So why can I also hold R? So for instance, if you are drawing and you just suddenly want to rotate, you can just hold R, rotate, and as you can see, the cursor will go back to the previous tool that you have used. So that's helpful to know. All in all, that's just something you need to learn when you are navigating in Photoshop. So just press space to pan. Space plus control will help you zoom in and out. Rotate is R, simple as that. And just click S to escape. So it's gonna take some time to get used to, but trust me, over time this is going to be second nature. So moving on. So Photoshop, this is, if there is one thing you need to take away in this shortcut list, it's this navigating Photoshop. Because this is something that we really need to be second nature for us. So it's like holding a pencil. For in Photoshop, we have to do this in second nature. We have to be know this like everything, because this is gonna help you speed up your workflow when you are drawing in Photoshop, because this is like holding your paper. You need to rotate, click R, you need to put it back. That's you need to pan, because that's the most important things we need to do when we are navigating in Photoshop. So now we are going to head on to a different topic. Now we are going to head on to the color panel. The color panel is something we really need because it's gonna help us on choosing our colors. So to find the color panel, which is this one here, all we have to do is go to Window, find color, and click on it. So let me just do it again so that the color would appear. So in choosing colors, this is gonna help us a lot. So one important thing we should know is the color picker, because this is going to save us a lot of time. So for instance, let's say you made 3 different colors and you want to go back to them. So instead of finding this specific color here and trying to estimate where they at, all you can do is just hold Alt, and as you can see this eyedropper tool, just click it and you can see that it will change. So it has the same color as this one. Same goes here. If you want the green one, you could just hold Alt, click it, and you could make the same color. And this one, of course, I could also choose here. Anywhere on the canvas, I can color pick it so I know the exact color. So when you're doing this, make sure you're using the brush tool. And of course, here is a brief guide on how to choose colors. So this is the hue cube. This is what I use when I am picking colors. So a guide here is when you go up this cube, your color gets lighter. That's why there is a white color here. And when you go down, it gets darker and darker, which explains the black here. Now, next, when we go to the right, it gets saturated. While we're going to the left, it gets desaturated. So, what is saturation in terms of colors? Basically, this is how intense your color is. So, when a color is too saturated, this is going to be attractive for our eyes because when you choose a saturated color, it's gonna make or break your artwork. So, for example, neon colors really make us look when we are presented with it. So, here's an example. I'm just gonna get a very saturated green. As you can see, that is very intense. So, when I'm going to desaturate it, going to the left for a bit, you can see the difference. So, let me just make it a harder color so you guys could see the difference. So, this is more appealing to look at than this one because sometimes this is too intense for our eyes. So that's saturation and desaturation. And of course here, if we click this upper left box here, this is our foreground color, it is going to show us a window like this. So basically, this window is the same as our hue cube here, but only the difference is it has these numbers and letters here. So no need to get overwhelmed. I'm just gonna explain this one by one. So H is hue, and hue is just another term for color. So this right here is hue or color, so we could choose any color we want. The S here stands for saturation, which this one, what I mentioned earlier. So when we go down, our color becomes less intense. It's like it's taking the life away from them. And eventually it will reach white. So that's saturation. B is for black, or this is like how light or dark your color is. And the RGB here is just red, green, and blue. The hue cube actually does the work for us because it already shows the color, the saturation, and the black or how light or dark our color is. One thing to keep in mind though here is this hex code because this is going to help you a lot. Sometimes when you're searching for colors, they're gonna give you this random code here, and that's the hex code. You can think of it as a name for your color, and every color has a different hex code. So when you find some cool color on the web and it has a code on it, what you can do is you can copy it and paste here so you have the same color as you want. Now we just click OK. So that is the color panel. In here, if you are not used with the hue cube, you can also use other things when choosing your colors. So there's a lot to choose from, but personally I prefer to use the hue cube. So that's it for the color panel. Let's move on. So we know how the color panel works. But before I move on, I just want to add something. This color panel is just a guide for us when choosing our colors. And just as I mentioned, like the title of this live stream, it is digital drawing for beginners. So we don't really need to get overwhelmed with these colors because for beginners, you can actually just choose a random color. I mean, that's okay, but I would suggest is to study color theory because color theory is gonna help you a lot when choosing your colors. And after that, it's just a matter of trial and error if you're gonna choose your colors because sometimes desaturated can be good at something, saturate like very saturated colors can be applied to something, and even if you can combine them, you can actually make great artworks. And actually, you don't even have to study colors if you are not into it that much because you can even make a good type of drawing by just making a black and white stroke. So that's just it. So you don't really need to think about it that much. So now, so after color panel, now we head on to our brush panel. which is this one. So to find your brush panel, what we're going to do is go to our menu bar, click Window, and choose Brushes. So it's right here. So I'm just gonna click it again. So there is our brush panel. So this brushes is actually our pencil case because most of the tools for our brush is here. So if we want a soft round, a pencil, something like a wet media, it is all here. And of course, there are some cases where there are other artists are giving their brush packs. You can actually import them here. But for now, let us stick to the defaults. So to find your brush tool, you just have to click B, or it's actually this icon right here. So now let's try to use our brush tool. So here, for now I'm just going to delete these layers. So when you're using the brush tool, make sure you are on a new layer so you could draw. So right now I am on a new layer and I can draw. So make sure you're in a blank layer, and now we are going to test the pressure sensitivity. So pressure sensitivity is like this. I'm going to change the color to black. So the lighter I press, as you can see, the strokes are kind of light. So if I press hard, you see those bold strokes. So that's pressure sensitivity. If I use a soft round brush, as you can see, it is seen right here. So what if you are drawing but it shows like this? Like it shows this consistent lines, like no matter what pressure you're doing. First, make sure this is highlighted because that is where your pressure comes from. Just make sure this is on because most of the problems of pressure sensitivity is just because of this button. If it doesn't work, make sure you go back to your drivers. So as you can see, that is the brush tool. So you could choose any brush here you want. You just expand those so you could see other stuff as well. As you can see, they are like a bit different from each other. So feel free to experiment them when you have the time. So for now, I'm going to stick with a soft round brush. Now, one important thing you also need to know is the brush size. You can adjust them by using the brackets. The brackets next to the letter P. So as you can see my cursor here, I'm just going to remove this layer. My cursor here, if I click the bracket, is turning small. If I increase the brush size, it's going big. And you can also notice the brush size here. So it depends on your personal preferences. But mine, I prefer to keep it at 4. And of course the pressure sensitivity, make sure it is on. So that it looks like a pencil. So that's just personal preferences. You might find yours when you try to snoop around this area. So next, opacity. Opacity is how transparent an object is. And opacity is something that you're gonna come up often when you're using Photoshop. So for instance, you can see opacity is right here. And on our layer panel, there is also opacity. So let me just demonstrate. I'm just gonna use a hard round brush. Make it a bit thicker so you guys would know how opacity works. So I'm just gonna delete it again. So this is 100% opacity. So if I just lower this to, let's say, 60, this is 60% opacity. This is 11% opacity. And of course, this is 1, but I doubt if you can see it, but there's something there. So this is like a watercolor. So if I put like 27% opacity, see that this is going to overlap and it's going to be darker and darker and darker and darker until it reaches this 100% opacity. So opacity doesn't only apply here in our brush but also in our layers as well. So If I click on this layer and adjust the opacity, so you can see there's a slider here, just hold left, now it's gone. If I put to 56%, it's 56% transparent. If then I go to 100, then I can see everything. So this is useful when you're going to choose a reference image and just lower the opacity so you can draw on top of them. So that's for opacity. Next is the flow. So the flow can be found here on top. So one way to think about flow is like it is like the flow of an ink ball pen. So for instance, I think you guys have experienced this, but when you buy a fresh new ball pen, it has this constant and vibrant ink to it when you write. So it is fun to write with because it is consistent and it is very flowy. But when over time your ink starts to lose, and sometimes it would end up lighter than it used to be, like the ink is drying or it is dying. So that's how flow is. So just let me explain how flow works. So this is my soft round brush. So at 100% flow, this is what it would look like. Let me just also increase the opacity. So 100% opacity and flow, this is what it would look like. If I decrease the flow to 50%, you might not see much difference, but you can see it's starting to lose that boldness into it. So I'm going to change it to 7%. And as you can see, it's like it's losing life. And if I put to the lowest possible, 1%, it is very light. So if you want a lot of ink, you could just go to 100%. So that is flow. You could experiment with it along with opacity. Next is the eraser. So of course, if you're drawing something, you need to erase it sometimes. So for eraser, you just have to click E. So E, this is the eraser icon. And then the eraser acts the same as brush, but it just erases. So as you can see, I have a lot of stuff here, so I want to erase it. But the thing is, this can also be used as an eraser. So if I use a soft round, just make sure you're on this eraser icon. As you can see, it erases just like a soft round brush. But if I use a hard round as an eraser, it is more sharp compared to this soft round. So anything here I can use as an eraser as long as I'm on the eraser icon. So notice that I'm here as in my eraser icon. But if I click the brush, it's going back to my soft round brush because that's the previous brush I used for my brush. So brush, and I click eraser, so eraser. So see, there's a lot of possibilities when you're just using these two things. So I believe that's it for the brush panel. I'm just gonna put the brush panel back here on the bottom. Then we are going to move on. So after we move on, there is actually one thing that a brush panel needs. So in digital, if we need in digital, we need a brush for us to write with. But if we're gonna imagine this traditionally, we need a paper and a pencil to write with. So after explaining this, there's actually one thing a digital tablet or a digital drawing has an advantage compared to traditional drawing, and that is the layer panel. It's having layers, which is this one right here. So right now I'm gonna show you guys how the layer panel works. So for reference, I'm just gonna put this here for the layer panel. So let's just move on to this lecture. So layer panel. If you can't find your layer panel, you can just go to Windows, look for layers, and you can see the layer panel, which is this one. So when you're adding layers, we just have to click the plus sign. So here, this is the plus sign if we want to add a new layer. So there you go, plus sign. There's just also a shortcut for adding a new layer, which is Shift Control Alt and N, which is a lot. So if you want, you can do it. Shift Control Alt N, and there you go. You have a new layer. So that is for adding layers. So if you want to get organized, we can actually rename your layer. So all you have to do is to double click the name. So I'm going to double click it. For this one, let's say I'm going to put here paper. So there you go. You can actually rename the name of your layer. So next is removing layers. If we want to remove a layer, you can actually click this and just click the trash bin right here. So that's the trash bin. If you want a more shortcut, you can delete this using the delete button on your keyboard. So that's the most basic things of how we use layers. So the next is we can hide or unhide layers. So basically this is a layer. So I can hide and unhide it. So this is useful if you don't want to use that specific layer, or if you just want to know if what layer are you using. So what layer is this? What's inside of it? So that's the benefits of it. The next is lock layers. We can actually see it usually when we are going to make a new canvas. So here in our background, it is actually locked because we can see the padlock sign here. So if I have my brush tool and I'm going to try to draw on it, because you can see the padlock disappeared. So I'm just going to lock it, and it's gonna say this window right here, which says could not use the brush tool because the layer is locked. So this is very helpful when you are going to draw a sketch and you want to put a line art on top of it. So if you don't want to mess that layer, you can use the padlock for that. So next, we are going to lock transparency. So lock transparency is something that is very useful, especially when we are coloring. So to lock transparency, it's actually this chessboard looking thingy, but it's like the transparent symbol. So to give you an example on how that works, I am going to choose a hard round brush. I'm just gonna increase the size. And let's say I'm gonna choose a random color. I'm just gonna draw this one. So if I am going to choose another color, let's say this blue color right here, and just draw on top. So it's like drawing traditionally, drawing on top of one another. But what if I use transparency? If I lack the transparency, I cannot actually draw outside, but I can draw inside that specific layer. So what does lock transparency mean? So it means that you can only draw on something that has a mark. So I cannot draw here because this is a transparent part. So that is lock transparency. Moving on, we have the clipping mask. Clipping mask, all you have to do is hold Alt, and you can see this sign here, and move the cursor between layers and click. So here in this canvas, I'm going to explain how that works. So right now I have this one. I'm gonna make another random stroke again. For like for lock transparency, what we did was we used a single layer. But with a clipping mask, we can actually do more. So let's say I'm gonna choose another random color and I'm just gonna draw on top of it. So as you can see, it still goes out beyond the brush. But if I use like, if I use a clipping mask, just hold Alt, and if you go between these two layers, you can see the icon has changed. So if I click it, now it is similar with the lock transparency, but right now I have two layers. So what I can do is I can hide or unhide. I can actually use another one color. If I just add a new layer and I use Alt and clipping mask, then I can just draw on top and on top and on top until this is full if you want. Just make sure that this is the only thing you could draw. This is the only place you could draw. So that's for the clipping mask. Next, for organizing your layers, we have group layers. So for group layers, you hold Control or Shift. It's similar with your handling your files when you're using Windows or Mac. choose the layers and click Control G. So with this one, we need to group our layers. So once again, I'm just gonna delete all of this. So this is my first layer. So let's say I'm just gonna make a random stroke. This is another layer, and this is another layer. So right now I just made a figure. But if I want to move them in one side or just to make them in a folder, what I can do is just make sure one is highlighted, click Shift so you could select them all. If you want to select just 3 and 1, you could click Control and just select 3 and 1 and just click Control G. So there you go. It means it's going to be grouped. So click Control G and there you go. Everything is grouped. So group is like just a folder. So every part of your layer is here. It's untouched. And you just group them so you can just move them anywhere you want. Okay, next is we have the merge layers. The merge layers is actually similar to group layers in terms of the function, but instead of Control G, we are going to use Control E. So let me just show you how this works. So this is a group layer. So for everyone's knowledge, we can actually ungroup this by clicking right click and we're going to see ungroup layers. So right now it's ungrouped. So when we are grouping, these layers are actually different from one another. But we can actually merge this into one. So instead of having 3 papers, we can just use and make them one layer. So what I did was I just make sure all of them is highlighted using Control or Shift, and then I click Control E. Control E. So there you go. Then it's merged into one. So after merge, you can also duplicate a layer, select and just click Control J. So when we are actually duplicating a layer, this is very helpful if you want something, if you're experimenting with something when you're drawing. So let's say you want this one, let's just duplicate this, click Control J, and there you go, it says layer 3 copy. If you forget the shortcuts, you can just use right click and you can see some of the options I said earlier, which is this one, duplicate layer. But I suggest you try to memorize the shortcuts so your life would be easier. So okay, this is the layer panel. So F7 is its shortcut. So I'm just gonna go back here. Right, so that is our lecture for our layer panel. Now, so after the layer panel, of course, we have learned the brush panel. So just a side note, when using a brush, like using the brush panel, we don't really need to use all of them. We just need to find the one that works for us. And I know sometimes it can be daunting when people or your favorite artist has this specific brush that you need to use or specific stuff like that. You don't really need to buy those because you can actually make them. So why buy something expensive if you can actually make your own? Because just like a drawing tablet, buying the most expensive brush presents won't make you a great artist. So like before, I just want to say that just find the one which it works for you. So for me, it is a soft round brush with a 4 pixel size. So after the layer panel and brush panel, let us move on to the now we move on to our shapes and paint bucket tool. So shapes is something you're gonna use often if you want to use shapes. So for the shapes, you can actually find them here, or you can just click the letter U. So right now this icon says rectangle. So it means the icon I can only draw is rectangle. So as you can see, that's a rectangle. And in some cases, there's a new panel appearing here, so you can actually just close the tab group if you want. But actually, it's just the same as here. So this is the shapes tool. So if you want more shapes, you can actually hold this one here, and it's gonna appear a window full of shapes. So you can use an ellipse or a circle, a triangle, a polygon, a line tool. So that's a shape that I created. So You can also make a perfect shape when you hold shift while making your shape. So right now I'm gonna click. Right now I'm just clicking. I'm not pressing any keyboard button. But if I hold shift, as you can see, it creates a square rather than a rectangle. So right now, let's say I'm happy with this. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to let go of my pen on the tablet. Then I have a perfect shape. And as you can see, it is plain black from inside to the borders, because in your shape there are two parts, the borders and the inside. So if you don't want a color on the inside, you just have to go here to the fill. Fill is the inside. If I click this one, it's going to be transparent. And I can also use other colors, but right now I want it to be transparent. Now for the stroke, it's also the same, but what's affected is the stroke. So right now let's go to black. There you go. So here, as you can see, there's a number here. Basically, this is how thick or thin the border of your shape would look like. And let's say you don't want this flat, straight border. You can actually edit it if you want it to be a broken line. So you could also use dots. Right now, let's go with this one. So that's shapes. And if you look closely, there's this circle here. And if I move this here, it's going to be like a circle. That's because the edges is getting more curved. That's the thing that it's going to do. So if it's 0, it's very pointy. But if I adjust it right there, it's gonna be more curvy. So that's their shape tool. So if you want to transform these tools, okay, I'm just gonna click enter. So you see, it's just a plain shape. And if you go here to our layer panel, it has its own layer and it says rectangle with that shape here. So if you want to transform it, you just go to this layer, make sure it's highlighted, click Ctrl T, and it's gonna appear like this. So transform, you can use transform tool to move it and also to adjust it. So as you can see, if I'm adjusting this, it's only adjusting the height of the square. So what if I want to adjust only the upper part? So like deform it. If I'm going to deform it, I'm just gonna hold shift and then click one anchor point. And as you can see, the only thing that's affected is its height. In here is its width. So Ctrl Z if I don't want it to be like that. And of course, I'm just gonna click enter and that's gone. As you can see, if there is this appearing here, if you cannot find this, just make sure you are on this shape tool, because if I go to the brush tool, it's gonna disappear. But if I go to the shape tool, now I can edit it again. So let's say you want to draw on top of this. If you're on this rectangle layer and you try to use a brush tool to draw, it's not gonna be working because the shape layer must be rasterized before proceeding, because this layer here is vectors and we cannot actually draw on vectors unless they are rasterized or unless they are editable. So this shape layer must be rasterized. Should we rasterize the shape? Yes. So as you can see, the icon here disappeared and this rectangle just became a normal layer. So right now, I can actually draw on top of it. But when you rasterize your layer, take note that you cannot actually edit them. So see, if I click the U icon, I have to make another shape. So just keep that in mind if you want to keep that consistency if you want. But right now, this is just a plain layer, so it's rasterized. Which brings us to our next tool, the paint bucket tool. So the paint bucket tool is this bucket here. The shortcut key is G. And right now I have the paint bucket tool. So I can choose any color here that I want. So if I just use this one, now it's gonna fill that empty space here. you can also use it this one. So as you can see, this isn't affected. That's because I'm on this layer. So if I remove this, only this outside layer is affected. So if I want to fill that, I'm just gonna go to its respective layer and click fill. So that's something you have to keep in mind. I can also fill the layers, if the border, if I want. So that's the paint bucket tool. Now, there's another tool, which is the gradient tool. It is the same with the paint bucket tool, but instead of a solid color, I can actually paint using gradients. So gradients is like one color to another, or one color to being transparent. So if I want to go to the gradient tool, I can just hold this one, and it says gradient tool, or I can click Shift G until that icon appears. And now I have this gradient tool. So to give you a better understanding of how it works, I'm just gonna leave that there. So right now I'm gonna choose a random color, let's say green. And you can see this line. So what I did is just I click, drag. I'm not letting my pen go at the moment. So if I did this line and I remove it, you can see this gradient right here. This works awesome if you have a clipping mask and a artwork. It's gonna look good. So if I make it shorter, it's gonna be more sharp. If I do this a bit longer, it's gonna be more softer transition. So I can do it anywhere. You can also adjust what kind of gradient you want it to appear in here on the top left. So that's gradient tool. And also if I press this drop down here, I can actually have a variety of gradient which I want to use. So these are like presets, so you don't have to do things manually. So that's our gradient tool. Now let's just bring back our shapes and paint bucket. So that, my friends, is the shapes and paint bucket tool. So let's just take a break from Photoshop now and let's just read the comments. So from Raven, I only use two brushes for line art and coloring. In rare cases, I use four brush for shading and using airbrush. Actually, that is a very smart move because when you're starting, you really need to just go to the basics, to the defaults. We don't really need a lot of tools. We just only need to find the one that works for us and we actually do the rest of the work because brushes are just one thing. Like 99.9% of the work will actually come from the artist. So next is AJRGJC. So the brush tool is one of the tools I can master in Photoshop, especially when doing digital artworks. Yes, that is actually a thing because it actually took me a lot of months to find that perfect brush for me. And little did I know that it's just a default brush with a very small brush size. So don't worry about it. You can actually get used to it once you found that something right for you. So next is from Gilmore Dawang. Good evening. Good evening to you too, Gilmore. Glad you're here. And next is from Dan Dream. Exactly. Customizing your own brush works fine than using only one brush. Explore for more. And actually, that's also good too. You can try to explore when you think you have like enough experience with using a brush because some cases we can use like custom brush tools so we can make our artworks easier. But if you're a beginner, just try to stick with the default one and eventually you're gonna find out which one works for you. So thank you guys for the comments. I really appreciate it. Okay, so now that we are done with the shapes and paint bucket tool, we are going to move on. So let us see. So shapes and paint bucket tool. Now that we have this out of the way, let's move on to the selection and move tool. So let me just hide this layers and this one. So selection and move tool. first we need to understand what selection is. So selection is like cutting a paper and pasting on it onto another paper. So to better understand this, I am going to do some demonstrations along the way. So one example of selection is Control A. So make sure you're on a blank layer. So for instance, I just made this one blank. So if I click Control A, I'm actually gonna make a selection, which you can see right here. So if you can see this broken moving lines, it means that you already made a selection. So basically you can use or do or draw anything in this selection. If you want to remove this, you just click Control D, and that means you don't have any selection anymore. So later on, we're gonna know why this is useful. So lasso tool. So to get the lasso tool, click L and draw your selection. So let me just demonstrate this in a blank new layer. So for this one, I'm going to create a new layer. So first, let us create a shape. Even a rectangle is fine. And then make sure it is filled with any color you want. So let me just make this lighter. So that's a lighter color. So first, if we want to use a selection, let's just make sure that this is rasterized, so we can edit it. So click the right click, go to this, and you can see rasterize layer. So if I rasterize this layer, I can actually draw or erase on top of it. So for selection, just like I mentioned earlier, click L. So click L for the lasso tool. It is also found here. So I am just gonna draw anything I want. So imagine the lasso tool as a scissor. So as you can see, if I just let go, it's gonna make this selection. So one thing that's useful about selection is that when you're gonna draw, I'm gonna use a thick hard round brush. I can only draw inside the selection, so that is very helpful. And another thing is, let's say I didn't draw there. If I click the transform tool or Control plus T, while in this selection, you can see I can actually cut some piece out of it. So I just have to click enter, and now I have this different selection and this unique crop brush set. So you could use actually this for landscapes. So if you want to make mountains, you can use the selection tool easily. So the thing is, when something is selected, you cannot draw anywhere unless this is the specific selection. So to remove this, so you are able to draw outside, you just have to click Control D. Now as you can see, I can draw anywhere. So that's one helpful thing about selection. So just make sure you're selecting a layer with there's something in it. So there you go. So next is the move tool and transform tool. So for the transform tool, if you haven't selected anything, it will actually move the whole layer or anything that is on that specific layer. So right now it's moving everything. But for the move tool, which is letter B or the shortcut, if I click the move tool, it is actually similar. I can draw on anything. I can still move. But what's the difference? The difference is if I make a new layer and say I draw another color, look at the difference. So I use the move tool. Only this is moving and this is moving. What this does is actually it selects this brush, like this entity, and it's automatically going to that specific layer in here so that you can move it. So if I don't know which layer is this one, I can just use the move tool to find out where it is. And it will only move all the objects in that layer. So that's how helpful the move tool is. Next is the shapes marquee tool. So the shapes marquee tool is different from the shapes earlier. So earlier for the shapes, we can create and draw shapes. But here, we're gonna make shapes, but as a selection. So the shapes marquee tool is actually this one. So we just need to click M. And as you can see, it's gonna change. And then hold Shift M if you want to change the shapes, or you could just hold this one so you can see what kind of shapes you want. So let me explain how this works. So right now I am on this layer, so I'm gonna go here. If I make a selection here using a shape marquee tool, it's gonna create a perfect rectangle. So if I just click Ctrl T, I can actually remove that just easily. So there you go. And if I just click enter, and of course I'm gonna deselect this, click Ctrl D. So that's the shapes marquee tool. You can actually even delete it. So if you make another one, let's say you want this area to be straight, you can just make a selection and click delete so that there is nothing on that specific selection. And of course, to remove this, we need to click Ctrl D. So there are also other shapes if you want. So adding selections. When we're making selections, we are not limited with only the shapes or the lasso tool. We can actually add selections by holding Shift when creating a new selection. So for instance here, this is better. Let's say I'm going to make this rectangle. So if I'm going to draw another one, you notice that it's gonna disappear. So what we want is two separate squares. So what I can do is, let me just go back here. I'm going to hold Shift, create another rectangle while holding Shift. And as you can see, there's two of them. So if I want to create more, I can create more as long as I'm holding Shift. And if I draw on it, as you can see, I can draw on those three rectangles. And of course, if you can add, you can also subtract. So when subtracting, instead of holding Shift, we are going to hold the Alt button. So here, let me just remove the brush there. So let's say you want to subtract. We can actually also use the lasso tool because they are the same kind. So if I hold Alt, you could see there's a subtraction sign there, so a minus sign. So it means you're gonna subtract something. So let's say I'm gonna put some teeth here. So I'm just gonna complete the selection, and as you can see, it took my mark. So if I want this to be even more sharper, yep, there, I can still do that by subtracting selections. And if I just choose a brush, and you can see I just made a face just by using selections. And as you can see, it has this clean, smooth lines, except for this part, but you get the point. So that is for our selections and move tool. Now after this comes the fun part. So are you guys ready for that fun part? Because after the selections in Move Tool, we are actually done with all the tools in Photoshop. Everything that we need, I've actually mentioned it earlier. So right now, you can just warm up and we can now finally draw on Photoshop just like this title of this rhyme stream. So without further ado, let's just draw on Photoshop. So okay, now that we are done with the selections and move tool, we are going to the best part, which is actually drawing. So let me just create a new canvas here so we guys are on the same page. So as you can see, I've made a new canvas. So in here, we're going to learn how to draw. So if there is one thing you need to take away from drawing, it is this. We need to use references when we draw, and it is an absolute must. So let me just explain here along the way. Here I have an image, which is this little guy here. Don't worry if you cannot find him. He's on the link in the description below. So what I did was just I copied and pasted him here, and I used Ctrl T, the transform tool, to make him a bit bigger. So now that he's a bit bigger here, I'm gonna explain why we need to use references. If you want to draw anything you want, we have to use a reference just for that because we need to know how one thing works. So this is how we're going to do it. So first, get your image and lower its opacity. Maybe 40% is good. So when we have a reference image, we need to break it down to its most basic shapes. So first, we need to go, I need a black pen. Choose your brush. I have a 4 pixel brush. So when you're breaking down, we need to go from big to small. Okay, so from big to small. What do I mean by this? Instead of focusing on this tiny detail here, we need to get the bigger picture. So what we're gonna do is create a new layer. So make sure you're on a new layer. And then we are going to get this basic shape. So this is one basic shape, as you can see. So don't worry, we're just tracing it right now. Doesn't have to be perfect as long as it is in line with what you're drawing. So now I'm doing this chicken sketches. You can actually do it, and over time, if you are improving, you can actually do this in one stroke. So okay, that is our first big basic shape. This is gonna help us with the proportions. Now I'm gonna get his two legs, which is this two rectangles here. There you go. And then the other one, you can copy here, and that's the two rectangles. Now we need to just trace his bag. So this looks like a rectangle with a bit of a curve in it. So there you go. And of course, his helmet. So I'm just tracing here. So if I were you, try to just sketch one line only. Instead of tracing it all in one stroke, that is wrong. Try to trace them by one line or one curve. So as you can see, now I have the construction of this little guy here. So if I hide my reference image, you can see that he looks like this. So this is the construction. This is the important thing we need to do. So after tracing, here comes the learning part. What I want you to do is to create a new layer and try to recreate the construction that we did here. Instead of tracing it, we're just going to do it here on the other side. So first, we need to go from big to small. So I am going to try to copy this length here. So if you don't know if you're right or wrong, you could use your hand or your fingers to your monitor so you know if it is the exact height or not. What you could also do is try to extend this line so you know you have the same proportions. And I'm also gonna do it here on top. Feel free to use the line tool, which is here on our shapes, and it says line tool if you want a perfect proportions. So here I am going to make this line here. So I'm just gonna compare where this ends, so it's right about here. So I'm just gonna get this distance and transfer it here. So this is where like the end point. Oops. So this is where the end point of my stroke. So I am going to measure that. So maybe around here. So I'm gonna go up and maybe just make a line there. Then I am going to connect them. So there, I'm connecting. And then next, there is this slight slant here going down. Then I'm just gonna check my proportions if they're correct. Then I'm just gonna connect this part down here. So maybe just down here. So don't worry if you have this messy sketch, it's just a sketch. Next, we move on to its feet. So what we're doing here is just practice, so we are ready for creating our character later on. So I'm just gonna try to estimate how this look like. Maybe around this one, trying to measure it with my fingers. And there you go. And the next is the other leg. Maybe it's right here. We're estimating it. And of course the backpack. I'm just gonna extend a line and maybe it's right here. And of course this one is aligned here. There you go. Then we're just gonna connect this line. So connect. We're connecting it. Then we're actually almost done. Next is the helmet. We're just gonna extend this line here so we know its proportion. And as I said earlier, it's okay if you use a line tool, it's not cheating. So now I'm gonna estimate where this line is. So if I cut this in half, this is gonna be very helpful because now I can estimate it easier. So I'm just gonna do this half. Then I can now copy what this looks like. So for now, try to look at this space right here so you can have a clear idea on how the proportion looks like. And of course this helmet here, I'm just gonna try to copy it. This one extends a bit outside, as you can see. Make sure to look at those curves, and because not everything is a straight line, so sometimes those lines have a certain curves to them, and it's good to be more diligent when you're looking at this. So you have to be more attentive to details. So actually with that we have our construction. So if you are not sure if you put the right stroke or if you are right or wrong with the proportions, what you could do is go back to this here, the one you traced, click Ctrl T for the transform tool, and just compare if you did well or not. So in my drawing, I think I made it too big. So there's a lot of things that I could still improve. So after comparing it, then I'm gonna adjust my mistake. So I could use the eraser to adjust it because I made it too big. Adjust the legs. And of course, make sure you are on the right layer. So that's just for construction. So this is just a warm up on what we are going to do. Take note that we should start from big to small when we are using references. So with that, let us move on. Okay, moving on to the next one. Alright, now that we are done with our warm-up, it's time to create our own character. So trust me, this stuff here isn't made in vain. So we're going to make our own character. Let me just group this one. So I'm just going to click Shift and click Ctrl G so that I could group this and hide this layer. So right now, I'm just going to click a soft round brush, which is for pixels because I accidentally clicked the hard round. So when you're making our character or drawing anything, just I mentioned before, we need references. So here is the references we're going to use today, and this is on the link below, so don't worry if you cannot find it, it's just there. So right now it's too big for my canvas, so I shrinked it by using the transform tool, which is Ctrl T. So I'm just gonna put it on the right size. So we can actually do this because as you can see, the difference is only their clothes, their colors, and of course their hair. So right now let's just focus on one guy. Now here we can use the selection tool and then select this two. Then when we let go, just click delete and it will delete those other images. So now we have this one guy left. So let me just make him a bit bigger by using the transform tool again so that we can see it clearly. Okay, right now I'm just gonna lower his opacity. So because we are starting with a sketch, I'm gonna lower his opacity and I'm going to head on to a brush tool. Now make sure you are on another layer, okay? So you're another layer. Now we are going to get his basic shapes. So remember, we are going from big to small. Okay. So first let's get his body. Here you can actually see that this is kind of a rectangle, and we can just make this like that. For his shoulders, we can make this like a triangle that has been cut off. So that's just his body, and of course the neck. Then make sure everything is connected. So I'm just gonna connect them here. Next is his head. So this is a bit tricky, not because of its the shape, but around here because we don't really have an idea on how his head would look like. So for now, let's just trace the bottom part because it's easier. So there you go, you have this kind of head right here. Now, to get an idea on what his head looks like, just imagine him bald. So we won't get into much to detail. We are not going to overdo it, like draw the head here, because that is not possible. His hair is over there. So try to draw it. And you can estimate it, but don't worry. So the extra here is like the volume of his hair, so you don't have to worry about that. Next is his ears. So his ears is actually really simple. It's like a C shape or a rectangle, any way you want to think of it. And that is his head. So if I just move this here, you can see that we already have done a lot. Okay, so next is his facial features. So instead of drawing the eyes directly just like that, because you're tracing, we need to use guidelines so we can estimate on where his eyes is at. So I'm just gonna find the middle point and I'm gonna draw a horizontal line. So that way I know that the eyes would sit right in this line. So for easier reference, we're going to divide this vertically. So since the head here is symmetrical, we want to make a line here. So as you can see, I can differentiate where the eyes is. So I just have to use these lines to find out where this circle sits in my drawing. And of course, just a little bit, you can see there's the the eyebrows. And here, just a little estimate is the mouth. Okay, so those are just some of the details. So all in all, this is what the sketch of our character would look like. Don't worry if it looks weird. It always looks weird if it's a sketch. We can always fix them later. So now, here comes your customizing part. Right now, I have this mannequin here. So it's up to you how you want to dress it. So I suggest if you have a picture of yourself, you can just put them beside Photoshop or use your smartphone so you could use your hair, your clothes as a reference. So for here, I'm just going to make another reference. I'm just going to search different kind of hairstyles. So here is one hairstyle that I found on Google, which is not mine, which is this one. So this one just gives you a lot of possibilities when it comes to hair. So maybe you want this one. So I'm just gonna put this on the side. So that's the sketch. So now we are going to redo this sketch, but of course right here. So I'm just gonna create a new layer. So make sure you're on a new layer. You can actually label it if you want. So I'm just gonna recreate this shape here. So this takes time and practice. So you just have to estimate it. You can use your fingers. And of course, this is how we are going to break things down. This doesn't only apply to this character, but actually everything you draw in general. So this is kind of a bit tricky, like where you want to place the head. So try to estimate it. So if you're having trouble where this should be, then try to go down and where this part should connect. So as you can see, it's the shoulder, it's the edge of the shoulder. So I'm gonna make a vertical line, and maybe the head sits right here. Maybe like that. For now, let's make a rough circle. So a rough circle doesn't have to be perfect, just close to our construction line. So maybe this, if you think. So one way to make sure if our circle is correct is if we make this vertical divider. So I'm gonna do this horizontally. There you go. Now we can try to focus on one side. So I'm gonna focus this quadrant here. Then I'm gonna focus this one. So I'm gonna focus on where to put this and also the other side. Because when we part things or when we subdivide, it's actually easier for us to measure than trying to estimate how to make this circle look like this. So now that we have this line, we can actually draw the ears. So as you can see, there's this little space here for the ears. And if we compare it here, there's a large space. So you can also estimate it here. Then just draw a very rough rectangle or curve or a C shape, whatever you think. Just look on how they are related to each other. So that's just the sketch. So there you go for the eyes, for the neck. So let me just connect this so it looks like he has a body. So for the eyes, we're going to estimate it maybe here, trying to compare and make sure the other side is also there. And for the eyebrows and the eyebrows. Next, we're going to try to estimate the hairline and make sure it is curved. So right now, this is how it looks like for just the body. And of course, let's just add the mouth right here. Okay, now we're going to customize it. So this is just the body. Oh, it is actually looking pretty well right now for this time. So okay, so now that we are done with the mannequin, it's time to us to customize our own character. So for now, I have this reference image for the hair. So okay, I'm just gonna make sure I am on the right layer. So if you are not confident that you can draw this in one stroke, feel free to use another layer so that you don't mess up this mannequin. So right now, I am going to choose one hairstyle here. Maybe this one looks good. So here I have the hairline. I didn't draw it here, so I'm just gonna give you guys an idea where the hairline is. So the hairline is where your hair starts growing. So if this is my hairline, I'm gonna imagine that the hair will grow here. So I'm trying to copy this hair here. So remember what I said earlier is we have to go from big to small. So even though this is our reference images, that doesn't mean that we have to go and draw each of this strand. We can actually just simplify it. So as you can see that this hairstyle is covering the half of his face. So and as you can see, the ears here are also covered and some here. We don't have to be too accurate, we just need to get the feeling. So here, let's try to make a volume of the hair. So as you can see, there is this kind of mark here in the hair, and that is because that is where our hairline is. So that is where the hair comes out. So I'm just gonna draw it like this, and of course draw it again. So as you can see, I'm adding volume. So don't worry if it looks kind of weird. This is just sketch. So next, you see there's a hair on his back. So you can also add that one. Like you can make it pointy or you can make it curvy. I suggest you try to make this a little thick, because if you make it too thin, it might not look cartoony or like the style that we are aiming for in this reference image. So maybe just like that. Okay, so now that we got the shapes, then we can make those strands. So as I said, we don't have to get into detail.
As you can see, there's this one here, and maybe we can add another strand here. There you go. We can also do it here. So we can also divide one strand. So what if we make a strand here? So feel free to zoom in, but not too much, so we don't lose two proportions. Okay, we can divide it here, and of course we can also divide it here. So there you go. There's no right or wrong way. Just draw what feels good to you, or if it's similar to the reference image. So this is just adding a bit of style. As you can see, there's this line pointing here, so sure we can add that so it looks cute. There. How about the other guy here? So there's a little tail here. We can also put it, because the details doesn't matter much. They're actually just the end part. We need to focus on the bigger shape here to make these details look beautiful. So there you go. There's a rough sketch of the hair. So you can see, like, we are not going to come up with this hair if we didn't look for reference images. So now that we have the hair, let me just try to fix his chin so it doesn't look confusing. Okay, so now the only thing that's missing is his clothes. So I'm just going to head on to Google again, and I found this reference image. Just resize this one, Control T, and just gonna make it small so that I could see it. So remember, when you're pasting things, you'll actually create a new layer, so make sure you are on the same layer when we were on earlier. So for me, I just chose this reference in Google. Now I'm going to try and recreate his clothes. His clothes is fairly simple, so we don't really have to think about it too much. So as you can see, that is his neck. So if that is his neck, so maybe his sweater goes here. So I'm just gonna make sure I'm on the right layer. So make it sure that there's a curve into it, so it looks like he is actually wearing it. So you can see, just simple. So to add a bit of style, you can see there is this seam here. So we can also add that too. So let's just make this a little bit thicker, so it implies that there is something there. Then just gonna follow that curve in the neck, on the neck. See? And it's just came from the simple image. Now you see there, he has a collar. So we can actually try to copy this style. They're just basic shapes. So as you can see, it's like a rectangle hugging his neck. So that's a necktie. So there you go. So you can also include those stuff there, so it looks like his collar is tucked into something. See, you already have your shirt. He already has his shirt. Since this is plain, we're just gonna leave it plain. So let's just make sure this sketch looks like a real person. Of course, gonna fix this one, gonna fix this neck, and there you go. So if you want to add more details, let's say you want a thicker eyebrow, sure, let's make a thicker eyebrow. And for his eyes, let's make it just right. And there you go. You already have your character. If you want to add more creases or folds or anything on his hair, sure, go ahead, feel free. So right now I am happy with this. So maybe except for the mouth. I mean, you can do every expression you want to do. So I'm gonna make him look like he's pouting. So let's just make it like that so it's different. So right there we have our own character just by using any references we found on Google. So next we are going to our line art. So
So for the line art, this is just going, you're just going to clean this sketch up. So okay, we're heading. So after this sketch,
So, for our line art, it is actually a matter of trial and error. But first, we need to fix this mess on our layer. So, I'm just going to hide our references and try to see where each goes. So, this is our customize. So, you guys could have a clear idea on what layer I'm using. This is the mannequin. So this is nothing. And this is our trace. This is our reference. So for the line art, let's just hide the traced layer for a second and bring it back to 100 opacity. We're going to use this as a reference. So do you remember the color picker, which is Alt? So if you hold Alt, you're gonna color pick it. So for the line art, as you can see, there's a bit of a color for the line art here. So as you can see, if I color pick it, it's not actually full black, it's a bit of a brown. So I'm just going to color pick it so you guys can have an idea. And it is actually better to have a line art that is slightly dark than going to all black. So for reference, I'm just going to color pick it. So this is my customize and my mannequin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group them. So I'm going to click shift, then just group them together. The reason why I group them because I want to lower their opacity in just one stroke. So instead of doing it one by one, I'm just going to group them and lower their opacity. So I'm going to create a new layer on top of them. And I'm going to change my brush into a hard round brush so that we have this crispy brush here. So I'm gonna increase my brush size, which is the bracket shortcut next to the letter P. And as you can see, I have this one. So for line art, of course, we are going to manually do this. So if you are not confident with your stroke, you can use this option here, which is the smoothing option. Basically, this stabilizes your brush strokes when you're making line art. So as you can see, if I go slowly, it is going to be a bit delayed. That's because it is smoothing. So if I put this on 100, see the difference? There's a huge delay, but your strokes are more stable. So right now I'm going to find which one works for me and which one works for you. Only you can tell. So maybe this is good, maybe this part is good. So let us try to copy this style. So this is actually a bit messy, so we could still do better. So I'm just gonna trace it like that. Then I'm going to make this one. Maybe just to add of style, let's add a bit of that hook right there. Of course, this one. Well, just make sure do one line at a time. There you go. One line at a time. And also here, one line at a time. That's for the hair. Another one here. Don't worry if it's overlapping, we can fix them later. Right now our focus is on the line art. So if you made a mistake, you can just click Ctrl Z and let me just do this again. There you go. Does it look good? No. I'm just gonna try to follow my sketch here. So there you go. So it adds a bit of a variety in there. So I'm just gonna connect it. And then here I'm going to on the top again. Then trying to do this in one clean stroke. So even if I'm doing this slowly, I don't get a jitter because I have smoothing with me. So that's the hair. If you're not confident, okay, let's just make a new layer. So always check your reference image on what they have done. As you can see here on the neck, on the chin part and the neck part, there aren't any line art. So let us try to copy that. And there you go. Thanks to the smoothing brush, we have this kind of clean stroke. So if you're not happy with it, just erase and try it again. And also, if you're not getting any good strokes, you can actually rotate your canvas to find which motion works for you. So that's for me, that's rotate. So I'm just gonna click escape to go back to this one. So you can also explore with different lines brush size. So you have different variety of lines, but now I'm just gonna stay with this one consistent line. So here I'm going to make the hair at the back and also here. So see, with just smoothing, we have this kind of clean stroke. So right now we're going to work with his neck just a tiny bit, and then his collar. So make sure his collar looks on the top. So there you go. Of course, the other one. So these are just rectangles. So I'm just gonna make a line here at the back so it looks like it is wrapping around him. And of course, this one. And his sweater. Just like that. And make sure you make a little bit of a bump here so it indicates there is a sweater. So there, it's nice and steady. There. So does it look good? I'm just gonna fix this part here. So I'm gonna try that again. So feel free to undo. You don't have to do this in one stroke. So maybe that looks good. So I'm just gonna fix this here. Make it look clean. Now I'm going to draw this one in one stroke and another stroke. Wait, let me fix that again. Another stroke. So here, one stroke and another stroke. It doesn't look symmetrical. I'm gonna do it again. So it's just a matter of trial and error. So now that I have this one, let's move on to the facial feature. So another layer. So for the eyebrow and another eyebrow. And for the mouth, you can just make him like that. And for the eyes, you can actually do this one if you want. And another one. But if you're not getting like this perfect shape here, what you can do is we can go to this shape tool, this one, and select the ellipse tool. So we have the ellipse tool here. You can just try to estimate it and make sure the stroke is the same as the color we have right now. So if I click enter, it appears like that and it has a new layer. So let me just close this tab group. What I'm gonna do is duplicate this layer by clicking Ctrl J, and I am going to zoom in, and as you can see, click Ctrl T so that I can move it. There you go, as you can see. So if you want this to be exactly at the same place, hold shift and move your cursor to the right. So as you can see, it has the same size. So as you can see. So these are vectors, so we want to rasterize them. But all in all, this is okay for our line art. So don't worry if this looks weird. Coloring can fix it. So with that, we are actually finished with our line art. So line art takes practice and time,
And as you practice, you guys will soon know how to use, when to use thin and thick lines. But now you're just focusing on this one. Don't really have to delve into it. So
Okay, now we are going to color our own character. So here, for us to color our character, we need first to go from big to small. So first we're going to find out which color occupies the most, then we head on to details. So for now, let us arrange again our layers. So as you can see, these are all our line art layers. So here for our eyes, we can just merge them into one. So I'm just gonna click Control or Shift, then Control E, so they are combined into one single layer. So here are the facial features, and you know what? I can actually combine them into one because they are part of the face. And since we are here on the line art, let me just make this eyebrow full so it looks like it is on top of the hair. So that's just one thing. You can actually remove smoothing now, so we don't have a hard time shading this kind of stuff. Let me just fix this, and there you go. Even if it's rough, it's okay. So that's our face, line art for the face, and this is for the body. So I'm just gonna group them into one. So click Control and Control G. So this is the line art, this is the sketch. Now here we also have the hair, so let's just put that there. For the coloring, let's make a new layer and make sure that layer is on the bottom of your line art. So if you're going to make, let's say, a color, it goes at the bottom, not like this, okay? So let me just undo that. So to have a similar color palette like this one, all you can do is just color pick it. So color pick it. So as you can see, the placement of this color in our hue cube is right here. So if you want to change color, so let's say we want some light brown, you can just choose here and find the color somewhere around here. So let me try this one. It might look too bland. This is better. So one way we can color is, of course, we have this hard round brush. We can try to outline the edges, so make sure they are connected so that we can use the paint bucket tool. So that is one shortcut. If you want to spend more time, you can color them all in one, but right now we are going to save some time by just using the paint bucket tool. So this is the paint bucket tool. Of course, right now it's on gradient, but if I click Shift G, it's going to the paint bucket tool. So right now we use the paint bucket tool, and as you can see, there are marks there on the side because it's not too much. So let's just fix it by using our brush tool. So there you go, nice and easy. This can be fun actually. So there we have a color for our clothes. So next for the hair. So what kind of hair you want to be, let's just color pick it, and as you can see, it is around this spectrum. So let's try something darker. So maybe this one. No, it is up for you, your personal taste. I mean, if you want, you can go with other colors such as blue. But since this is a sad character, I think I'm going to go a bit darker. So if you want to be dark, just go down till you find one for you. So maybe this one would work. I'm just gonna stick with this one. And just like I did earlier, you can just trace the outline. This is actually fun. So you're just tracing the outline so we could use the paint bucket tool later on. So there you go. There are actually a lot of ways if you want to color this, and using the paint bucket tool is just one option, just one shortcut. You can also use selections, but anything works as long as you do the work. So click G for the paint bucket tool and then just B. So let me just fix this real fast. course, there are some settings to this, but we don't really need to dwell into that. As you can see, our drawing is coming along. So there you go. And of course, he has hair at the back of his head. Just gonna add this one. It's actually fun. It's kind of therapeutic when you're coloring your artwork. And if you made a mistake, you just click eraser and start again. That's why we work on different layers. So right now, we don't have any color for the face. So I'm gonna color pick it again. So as you can see, he has a light skin. So you can feel free to experiment what color you want. Okay, just like this works. Then you're just gonna color it. Do the outline. There you go. Doing the outline. We don't have to worry much. So if you have this, you can just color pick the other color and go back here. So I'm just going to color the outline, and I can actually increase the brush size so I could be done faster. And of course, the ears should have the same color. And also here, and the neck. So for his sweater, I'm just gonna color pick this and make it a little bit darker. So in here in the hue cube, I'm just going a bit to the bottom right. There you go. And if it doesn't look obvious, then let's make it more darker so it has this contrast. So that's just coloring. You don't really have to be an expert to choose colors. If you use color picker, you can actually find similar colors that you can see. So here I'm just gonna choose a random light color for the color. So mostly my character looks brownish here. Okay, now we are going to draw those here, his cheeks. So once again, I'm just gonna color pick. Here, what I want you to guys to do is to create a new layer since we're going to draw on top. So here, go to our shape tool and try to estimate the cheeks. So as you can see, I've made one similar to it. So if I change the color of the stroke, it looks very similar to here. So I'm just gonna click enter and close this tab group again. So as you can see, I have one cheek here. So if I duplicate it, I'm gonna have another one. So I'm gonna click the transform tool, which is Ctrl T, hold shift and drag it here, just like what we did on the eyes. So I'm just gonna click check, and you can see these are on vector. So I'm gonna rasterize them. But first, let me just merge this into one. As you can see, they are one. Now I'm going to right click and choose rasterize layers so that I can erase them. So notice when I erase them, it looks like a cheek. So of course, I'm just gonna fix this part here so it doesn't look weird. But right now, I have a cheek. Now I'm just gonna color pick this color of his cheek and make a few strokes. So I'm just gonna lower the brush size and make just some random strokes. Of course, you can change the color. And there you go, you have a side part of this guy here. And of course, there are some other details, just like his hair. So what you can do is, if you're not sure, you can also create another layer. As many as you want. So let me just make a white, something like the background. So this is the highlight. You can just make them where the light hits, you think. Just don't overdo it. Just something that would look like it has volume. And that's about it. You have your own small character without learning a lot for a few hours. So feel free to let me know if you have any problems that you have encountered when you are making this character. So of course, you can do this again and again with different references, and you actually can draw any character you want as long as it is simple. So
this is actually just the first part. So, Mr. Mark, Ah,
Yep.
sure.
So once more, thank you so much for our participants who are still with us tonight. And let me just share my screen. So once more, if you have, for those who have questions, feel free to, yeah, comment them down below. Okay. So once more, challenging everyone to take up the challenge of Adobe certification exam. I'm gonna be sharing the link for the exam objectives. If you happen to accept the challenge of taking the exam for Photoshop. Okay, shout out once more to Angelo Trogon. Thank you for joining us this evening. Hoping to see your artworks as well, Angeline Jonicio. And yeah, thank you so much, Sir Dan Jim. Okay, so yeah, we'll be doing a quick raffle draw. Are we going to have a part two, Trisha, or they'll be expecting the online course?
Oh, sir, for this, it's what I've done is actually just half of our course. There's actually a part two, which is an isometric room. So I hope you guys are ready for that. I'm actually gonna prepare for that also.
Okay, so confirmed from our instructors. Words, no, we will be having part
Part
two. It will be covering the isometric stuff. Yep. And before we end this live stream, let's have a quick raffle draw. This time we will be giving away three subscription to LinkedIn Learning. I think it's $29 monthly. If you happen to avail of the subscription for LinkedIn Learning. So this will be 3 months, so $90 all in all. If you happen to be, yeah, reviewing to take the exam for Photoshop, I can type in here Photoshop, and there are tons of resources here to prepare yourself to take up that exam. Not only Photoshop, there's tons of content here inside LinkedIn Learning. So as you can see here, I'm seeing animation, illustration, motion graphics, graphics design, video. So tons of things for you to learn. In addition, we are about to finish the follow up for this live stream. Okay, we can pre-order for free. Uh, let me
pre-order.
confirm that. You may be thinking that pre-order has a fee. No, this is absolutely free. As a follow-up to our live stream training, we are in the works of doing a more condensed version of this course for everyone to watch on their own time. So yep, thank you, Raven. Raven. Yep. Because you mentioned animation, I'm excited also to turn those 2D drawings of Trisha as an animation in probably in After Effects. So once more, I'll be pasting the link for everyone to pre-order. Okay, so in a few days, this online course will be up and running. Okay. Yep. So once more, Adobe Community Philippines is a community of knowledge sharers. As you can see, we're not charging anyone for a fee. Okay, so we believe that education should be free for all. The solution for poverty is education. So, yep, we are, for those who are very adept and very familiar or an expert of an Adobe software, we're inviting you to be our next volunteer, sharer, guest, lecturer. Okay, so one of the perks is, of course, no sharing of knowledge is a very, very noble and good deed and has a positive impact. Okay, and yeah, we may be. I think we can sponsor your Adobe subscription and Adobe certification exam, granted that you share that knowledge, you inspire others, especially the young ones, into creativity using Adobe technology. So same like Trish. Okay, so thank you so much, uh, Trisha. And in Tagalog, no? Kung in Tagalog. Okay, mahal ko
Together.
kayo. Okay,
Okay.
sa lahat po ng mga natuto sa ating community, in the future, we're hoping na you get to share your knowledge din na natutunan nyo sa amin kung meron ba. And sana, no, no,
Sana.
let's pass the torch. Let's continue the flame of, ano, di ba? Sharing knowledge. Ayan. So, yep. If you're interested to, ayan, to teach any Adobe software, ayan, yep, we're inviting you. Please do share your knowledge like Trisha. So, more trainings to come. Our commitment to our country, to the world, absolutely free, all coming from the heart. Okay, so yep. Any last message, Trisha? Where can they reach you, find you?
So right now I'm here, but you can guys find me on LinkedIn. You can connect to me with LinkedIn. If you chat with me, don't worry, I'm gonna reply back. Especially if you need help with drawing or something, feedback. I'm actually very open for that, especially for beginners. So that's all. I like to thank my friends and my family for the support, and hope you guys learn a lot from this session.
Yep. Yeah. We have tons of training together with our friends, not only with the Adobe Community Philippines, but also with Digital Creatives Philippines. So this coming Friday, oh, this is very near, live in 2 days. Sharing the link if you're interested in creating 3D models, CAD models, using, once more, creating CAD models, 3D models using a web browser. So imagine that, using a web
Wow.
browser. No need to install. Okay, so join us this coming Friday as the senior vice president of PTC. Actually, PTC was the first one to create the CAD software Creo, and then other companies copied that software. So I hope if you're familiar with that, I salute you. You know what I'm talking about. So once more, this coming Friday, uh, Jordan J. Cox, all the way from Boston, Massachusetts, he'll be sharing what SaaS is, software as a service, cloud, and yeah, 3D modeling, uh, CAD modeling using a web browser. So imagine that. Also, we'll be giving away, I think, T-shirts and certification exam vouchers as well this coming Friday. So yep, very busy. Yep, we truly believe, yeah, education is uh, the solution. Okay, so once more, thank you everyone. Hoping to see you in any, or hoping all of our uh, communities and groups and in YouTube. Thank you, Trish.
Thank you. No problem.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Bye
night.
bye.
Bye
See you next
bye.
time.